What up, everybody? Welcome to the Xcast. Right about now, we want to welcome you to the greatest podcast on earth, hosted by yours truly, the XSP. I want to hear you say Xcast.
What? Oh, we're recording already? Oh, my bad. Hey, what's up, y'all? This is the XSP, and welcome to the Xcast with XSP. So it's been quite a minute since I've done this, and I think it's time to start over again. This is another season of the Xcast with XSP. The last one I did, it was about 5 months ago, with Michael Graves, who is the ex-singer for the Misfits, the ex-singer for Gotham Road, the ex-singer for Web of Dharma, and it was actually a pretty good one. It has some music in there, some live performances, also some insight on some of the songs that he sang that night. So, but we have a different guest today. And before I get to our guest, we do have some new media out there, or I have some new media out there. My name, of course, is the XSP, also known as the Extreme Street Preacher. And I'm a recording artist, and I have some new projects that you may be interested in. So, one of the first ones, we got physical copies here of Inner Lamb, also known as No Laughing Matter. This is for the juggalo who likes positive, encouraging messages with an aggressive delivery. This right here is called Jokes on You. As you can see, we're laughing at this little devil on the bottom right here. So myself, XSP, and also Sick Disciple, also known as Wig Split the Clown, are a project or a group, and this is a nice little not sampler, but a nice little EP that you can get online. You can get it through me, any of my social media links, which are connected there in the description box, or you can hit me up in a comment on there. But either way, get this one. Has some great features on there. Has Killer C. It has John Triumph. It has Seven Crowns Entertainment and Clado the World Destroyer. It's a very nice little collection of songs. Now, this one right here has a few bonus songs, more than what you see here. But online, you can only get a certain amount of songs. But in this one, you get a little bonus flavor. So if that's what you're into, that might help you to buy this right here. So No Laughing Matter right here is one of them. Another CD, physical copy. You can also listen to this online, and that's all awesome as well. You can listen to it on Spotify, YouTube, anywhere where streaming music is sold or streamed. It's called the XSP Oh Death, Where Is Your Sting? This is a very special album that I wrote after my father passed away in 2020. I was feeling very angry. I was feeling very helpless, and it comes out in this music. This is probably half rock, half rap. There's a lot of cool features on this as well. It has John Triumph once again, has Prolific out of San Antonio, Dave Cantu of Devil Beheaded, a very cool heavy metal band out of Texas. Also King DJC, the man with the Phantom of the Opera mask. And this has Insane Loke out of San Antonio, also Sick Disciple, and Pastor J, who is my brother, sings on this album. Very cool mix of songs. Don't let the artwork fool you. See, because the Bible says, "Oh, death, where's your sting?" Now, you may have to pass through the shadow of death, but there is light at the end of the tunnel if you're saved out there. Or if you want to just check out the music, right there. It's a great one. Hit me up, like I said, through the social media links or through the comments here. And also, as I've mentioned in other videos online, I have this game right here. It's called XSP-Xtreme Rules, the card game. So right here is a sample of what it looks like. That's all that I can give you. You have to buy the package. You have to buy the cards. This is an easy to play game, easy to learn. There is some reading involved, which is all the strategy that you can do. There's cards that will help you win. There's cards that will help you to defeat the person that you're playing with. This is a 2 to 6 player card game, and test played it with people of all ages, from teenagers to 60 years old. Everybody enjoyed it. Everybody learned how to play. So it's one that you might want to look into. So hit me up for that. Or you want a package deal, I can send all 3 of them. Just get with me. I also have a Cash App. It's $ XSP-238 if you just want to give a small token of your affection monetarily through that. Now, without further ado, let's get to our guest. His name is Steve Mechinus, and this is one that you will not want to miss, because we talk about God's supernatural hand, the ups and downs of church planning, and the slow crawl, the crawl out of darkness that some people go in. And in this case, I believe it's a case of redemption, and it's a wonderful story. So without further ado, once again, like I said, here is Steve Mechinus. So here it is, finally, after much talk and much trying to get our schedules lined up. I want to welcome everybody to, I want to welcome him to the XCast with XSP. Steve Mechinus is in the house. What's up, buddy?
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah. So it's been, I don't know, like a year since we've been talking about this.
It's been a long minute.
Been a long time. So I'm glad I got you on, man. I know sometimes the way that my brother's podcast works out, a lot of times he'll have somebody on, and a lot of, I'll have the same person. But obviously this interview is going to be so much different from what any kind of interview I've ever done before. And what I want to start off with is the question that I ask many people when it comes to starting interviews, kind of like an icebreaker. Have you ever seen anything that you couldn't explain, whether it be supernatural, whether it be Bigfoot, whether it be any kind of things like that? What have you experienced in your life when it comes to the supernatural or things you couldn't explain?
Well, with the supernatural, a lot of times years ago, before I got saved, I was always looking over my shoulder for the boogeyman. But, once I got saved, I've seen some stuff, but I know why, but seen people manifest, or eyes rolled back in their head. Seen a guy levitate one time when I was a kid, through a hypnosis, things like that. But I guess my deal is not so much the physical, spiritual, demonic, or Bigfoot. My deal is it's the things that happen when you give a testimony. People, when they give a testimony, they don't really talk about everything, right? They hold back some things, but a lot of those things are supernatural. And but I think there's a lot to be just talked about tonight, just about this is supernatural in that sense. God's sovereignty. How did God know? Dreams, things of that nature,
So real quick, before we get into some of those things, so what was the occurrence when you saw somebody levitate? What were the parameters of that? Because you don't see that every day.
Yes. Okay. True story. I grew up in I used to go to a Church of Christ, and it was in San Antonio. And you probably passed by the church. I'm whatever. I'll say the name, but it was a MacArthur. It's called MacArthur Church. It's right there off of 35 before you hit 410. Anyways, they had it was kind of like a mini conference, and they had different classes. And one of them was a guy was teaching it, he was talking about hypnosis and how the brain and how God made the brain, but I was too young to put those connections together, saying that something wasn't right. But at the time, I couldn't explain it because I just thought it was wild. It was a guy. He took a grown man and totally a man that I knew. So it wasn't like some stranger, like, oh, it was some guy that, they were all in cahoots or whatever. But it had he had one of the guy was he told so he put him through hypnosis, and then he told him to think back and took him back to when he was like 6 or 7 years old, and he explained. And so the voice dropped. He was like this boy, like this voice came out, and he was like real shy, and he was looking around, but he was under hypnosis. And the guy was talking to him, and he was like, so it goes, so tell me your teacher's names, fifth period. And he started rounding off some names, and it was just very spooky. Okay. And then during that same class, there was a person that was, I guess they picked out someone in the crowd or whatever, I don't know, but they got 2 chairs, and then they had 3 chairs. The person laid on 3 of them and put him through hypnosis, and the person thought he was a board, and removed the chair. And the girl wasn't skinny. Okay, I'm just saying, but she's sitting there, and her head, the tip of her head is on one chair, the tip of the chair, and her heels are on the other chair. And the weight was just, it was totally, so it was like she was stiff. And then he had someone sit on her, and it was like sitting on a board, and took the thing, and it was like you see it come off the chair.
Real
I couldn't
quick.
explain it at the time, but yeah, that was some real stuff, man.
Real quick, this is happening at a church.
Yeah,
that you went
church.
to?
Yeah, and
What that sounds like to me is the
Demonic.
game that people play, was it light as a feather, stiff as a board? It's almost like witchcraft, right?
Yeah. At the time, I had no clue, but I think looking back at it, I don't judge, and I'm like, oh well, blah blah blah. But I knew that these people they were dabbling in things that they had no clue, and it blew my mind. In California, when I was pioneering, prayed with some people, and just simple things like, just eyes rolling back, drooling, and you're just praying, and believing God would just, but just stuff like that, but nothing like that, you know what I'm saying?
Right. So it looks like, from what I'm getting here, for those who may not know what pioneering means, or who don't know what what prayer entails, or what church should be doing, because a large part of my audience may not be what's called saved. So can you explain a little bit what saved means, or what the road to gave you that supernatural outlook, or that Christian worldview?
Well, okay. Well, I grew up just doing my own thing, just messing around, smoking pot, drinking, just whatever, and how do I say? I grew up in church, and I played the religious game, and I just, I used to lead song service, and do this and that, but I was living like the devil, you know what I'm saying? Or, like a devil. And God got a hold of my heart, and came to a place where I knew that if I died, there would be repercussions for my actions. And you know what? True story. I was smoking so much pot, and I'm sitting there watching this movie. It was called hold on, Flatliners. The movie was called Flatliners. I don't know if you remember. It's an older movie, came out in the 90s.
That the movie with Kevin Bacon?
Yes.
With the ghosts, they're like ghost hunters or something like that.
So they would all flatline. There was a group of people that would flatline, and when their pulse stopped, they were fighting some of the demons of their past. and so everyone had different demons, whatever. I remember watching this movie, and I just to explain what saved is. I had no idea that if I died, that I would have to answer to somebody until I saw that movie. And I was so high. I remember watching that, and I'm sitting there, and right in the middle of it, I was like, dude, if this movie's true, man, when I died, man, I've done a lot of bad things, And then I go, man, and then it was just, I realized, dude, I could die and I could be judged and I would be so guilty. And I think those moments, little small moments, whenever the gospel was brought to my attention or someone witnessed to me, I realized that I had no savior. I couldn't change the way I was. I couldn't stop being a liar. I couldn't stop, listening to porn. I couldn't stop like the things that I was doing. I was a thief. I was a liar, and I wanted to be a good person. My intentions were good, but I couldn't change. Anyways, so to answer your question, I ended up receiving Christ in my life. It was 1999. And I was on 6th Street handing out beer flyers. And I just came to a place where I said, you know what? I trusted Jesus with my life. I repented of my sins. And I remember asking God to cover my sins so that I wouldn't be judged for them when I died. And he did, but being saved goes a little bit deeper than that. Now you have a relationship with a God, supernatural. You have a relationship with a God that supernaturally lives inside you, changes the way that you think, the way you act, the way you talk. And the things that I was bound by, I no longer controlled my life. It didn't, I had a joy. I had not just happiness, but it was like a legitimate joy where I realized, you know what, that I had a savior, and his name is God, and his name is Jesus, and I was set free. So when I talk about being saved, that's what I'm referring to.
So I know that my experience was very similar, not so much to the extent that I was out doing different things, but God seemed to give me a new identity. I know that when I got saved, I was a long-haired metalhead kid. Didn't really have any connection to, like you said, to a savior, and that God kind of changed the identity that he gave. Because to me, I tried to hide everything under the darkness that I was wearing, the clothes I was wearing, the imagery of death and destruction, but inside myself, I was a sad person. I know that I come from a broken home, and so the identity was I'm a broken person, and I want everyone to see how broken and how dark I am inside. Did God do the same thing for you and give you like a new identity or a
Totally.
new outlook on yourself?
He did. It was, and I say most people, they don't really tell the full testimony. So, your testimony changes through, but when I really got saved, when I was 25 years old, I pretty much living on the streets. And so my identity was whoever I was hanging out with. I was a crowd pleaser. And when I got saved, I realized who I was. And I realized the importance of Christ in my life, and the tragedy with me living without him. And it's like having a drill that doesn't have a battery pack. You have all the equipment, but there's no power. There's no, you can't fulfill your destiny or purpose. And when you say identity, which is a great word, God started putting some things in my heart to where I realized what I was designed for.
Hey, when you say you were a crowd pleaser, what were some of the different crowds that you ran with to kind of fulfill this need for to know who I am? What was it what was some of the different groups that you hung out with, or what was some of that, what did some of that entail?
Looking back, there was when I was adopted. So I had a lot of foster homes before I got adopted. I was an orphan through an orphanage for a while. And so looking back, asking myself like why I did certain things, because you're in so many different environments and families and you're moving and back, and you learn to adapt and just be whoever you're hanging out with, and I never really was a leader as into like, oh, follow me, do this. I could just be in a room with you and just be whatever I was just a survivor. And that's when I after I moved out of my house when I was about, maybe about 17, 18, kind of around there. A little bit before 18, I moved out of my house, and I just learned how to survive. It just came, I would hang out with metalheads. Back in the day, it was goth people for a while, and it's just, I was very adaptable. I didn't know who I was. Funny story. I remember being at a club one year. It was in San Antonio. It was a club, and I was there, and there was an area where you go down, and I was, just hanging out with people that I was hanging out with, And I remember I saw this guy that looked familiar, and the music was loud, and there was laser lights everywhere, and so I could talk to anybody, And so I'm wondering who this guy was, and I'm sitting there trying to get his attention, and we're getting closer, and I'm and he's waving at me. And as he's talking to me, the music's so loud, I realized that the people that he was standing next to were facing me. And I looked, and I realized that all those people were against the wall, and that wall was a huge mirror. And I was looking at my reflection. And I realized, and it scared me, because I realized I didn't even know who I looked like. I didn't even recognize myself. I've become so many different things, and I didn't even know who the heck I was. And I remember leaving the club that night right away, and I'm there in the parking lot, and another moment where God, just showing me a reflection of who I am. And it wasn't that I was scary looking, but it was the fact that I didn't know who I was,
So what it sounds like is all throughout your life, because you were adopted, because you didn't have a stable home environment, that you yourself could not even recognize even who you were as
Right.
a person. Like, because
Mhm.
most people kind of, when they're growing up, because they have their families, because they have certain norms and things that they grow up with, they kind of figure out, okay, this is the kind of person that I am. You didn't have any of that growing up, and being an
Yeah.
orphan, it's almost like you have no start point or no reference point. So it affects you even throughout your adult life. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, it was very natural to me. It was very familiar. It was a very familiar, yet at the same time, I could function that way, And I guess most people do that. I did that, and then you just kind of carried off into this, perverted little. I can manipulate people, and that's where, either it could be good or it could be bad, and so, but yeah.
And it's an interesting thing that how things like that, almost like, not, I don't want to say abandonment, but it almost is like abandonment can force a person to act a certain way, to look a certain way, just like you said, so they can survive. When I first met you, I know that we connected with music, and I know that some of the music I was playing back then was a little bit more rowdy. And I remember you say, "Hey, do you like this band? You like this band?" Was that just because that you could kind of connect on those levels, or was there a deeper connection?
There was so a lot of the music that at the time we were talking about the Crucified, Vengeance Rising, One Bad Pig, the 76. So all this, they were, I don't want to say there were phases, but there were music that I really started to like gravitate. I remember one time when I was hanging out with some people, and I remember going to a store, and I remember stealing an album from a Christian. It was from a Christian bookstore, and it was a 77s album. And I was just, you wouldn't even, I mean, why would you steal from a Christian? I was.
Hey, you say that, but when I was 15, I stole a Bible from a hotel. I was in Colorado, Winter Springs, Colorado, or Winter Park, Colorado, and I stole a Bible from the hotel. I was a long-haired metalhead kid. Why I stole the Bible, I have no clue.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't even into the Bible. I was not saved. I was at a point where I was at the worst on that end. Like, why I took the Bible, it makes no sense to me even now thinking back.
That's funny.
So,
well, hey, you know,
continue.
but you do things, and I tell you what, but it's the music. I really like the music. I just, my life, whether or not the music that I listen to, sometimes I wonder if I knew what I was listening to. I love the beat. I remember for a while I was into drum and bass, dance music. You know, like it's when I got saved, when I surrendered my life, things started to fall into place. And not that I still listen to certain musics, but a lot of it's you know, you're identifying yourself through Christ. And I'm just glad that I was able to listen to that kind of music. You know, I mean, it's cool music. You know, I mean, who doesn't like Ozzy Osbourne?
In the very beginning of us meeting each other, that's what kind of brought us together. And then we bond, of course, on deeper things after that. But while we're on the subject of music, you're a musician yourself. When did you first start to pick up an instrument? What's your instrument of choice? Because one of the things that I believe is that God gives us talents, and He gives us the ability to express what He's given us through instruments and song and things like that. Has God given, or first off, what's your instrument, and how is God giving you inspiration in your music?
The instrument that I have is a trumpet. It's a B flat trumpet, and I used to play in middle school, and I was a second chair, and then after I left my house, and I just never picked it up, and then I had this dream, probably in 2011, 2012, around there. And I had a dream that I was playing the final countdown on my trumpet. And I remember waking up, and it just sounded so good. You know, I was like, and I hadn't played it since I was a kid, right? And I wasn't looking for trumpets. I wasn't like talking about it. Just had this dream that I was playing it. And I remember just being so happy. And I turned to my wife and I said, you know what? I had this great dream, and I was playing the trumpet. And then I stopped myself and I was like, you know what? Dude, I could do that, you know? So I bought a trumpet and could not read music to save my life. Couldn't play it. Sat on it for 2 or 3 years. At the time, it was a dark time. I wasn't living right. I was battling my own, you know, it just was not right. I had a lot of bitterness and had bad relationships. So I really wanted to pour myself into something, and but I couldn't learn it. I just couldn't. And so a year went by, 3 years went by, so 5 years went by. And then I remember just praying, and I said, God, you know what? I've messed up so much brain cells. Reteach me how to play the trumpet. And God, I really think it was God. The next day was like, you know what? I started trying to train and play by ear, and I love it. I've been playing it for my church, and I'm right now, but then I wasn't. but I think God's real gracious, and I remember one of the other prayers I prayed was, God, teach me who you are through this trumpet. And one of the things that God's taught me was, it's not about me. When you play a trumpet, you don't play the whole song, and you only play to make the other musicians sound better.
It's
And
more of an accent instrument,
yeah.
right? Like you
Yeah.
add flavor to what's already there. That's an interesting thing that you prayed, because when it comes to music, I think that the Bible is full of musical references.
Mhm.
And you have a whole book, the longest book in the Bible, that has nothing but music. That's interesting
Yeah.
that you said that was God taught you about Himself through an instrument, and that's
Yeah.
one thing that if you can expound on that, because I think that's a very good
Well,
subject right there.
it was funny because so it took me about, after that, it took me about a month, and I started getting music like Radiohead, because Radiohead has these melodic notes that just kind of and I would just try to find certain notes. And I listened to Hillsong. Hillsong's the same way. And the more I started playing, it was about a month, and I started coming out with, repetition and doing certain things. And it was probably about 3 years later, started playing well. And there's days that I just totally bombed it, but you just keep playing because you want to play this thing, And I remember one of my customers, I do pest control, and I told him how I learned, and he was like, you know what? What you just did was you learned the Suzuki method. It's a method that they teach kids, like 4 or 5-year-olds, how to like listen to music and play when they're young. And so it was like God taught me, and I had to retrain me. And I really think it was God, it's man, I mean, I love the instrument, and yeah, it's good stuff, man.
That's awesome, man. So let's kind of segue into, okay, you were a pastor at one point. Can you tell us the lead up to that point and some of the ups and downs of being in California?
My wife and I, we were launched from our church in Austin to California in 2000. We were announced about 2008, and we were launched to go start a church from scratch. Started in my house in Clovis, California, and some things came up, and so I took over my brother-in-law's church in Madera, which was 45 minutes away from Clovis. And so we knew some people there. We'd been there already for about a year, and we pretty much, it was preaching 3 sermons a week, working a full-time job, trying to pick the right sermons, and learning how to love people, and while you're having your relationship with God. So it was different, but it was a good experience.
So when it comes to being a pastor in a whole different state, is there a difference between the way that the people receive you? Because there's a lot of jokes that talk about how California is, they say, don't California my Texas, or something like that. So is there was it noticeable? What was some of the things that kind of stuck out?
People have this, California, and the difference between Californians and Texans. This is 4 years of experience. Texans are open, real friendly, but so that we went to California. Californians are people there. How do I say? It takes them a while to open up to you. Took a lot of the people 2 or 3 years before people got comfortable and talking. And then after that, you're good. But at the same time, it's just people trust less. Or no, how do I say it? There is a different trust process versus in Texas, it's like everyone's happy, invite you over. Now, if you don't eat their food in Texas, that's another story. You know what I'm saying? Like, what, you're not eating my mom's, menudo, whatever. But California is different on that level. And then the demonic was, you could feel the different presence. The resistance was different. And I really can't explain exactly, but California really just exposes who you really are. And it's there's, when you step into that element of preaching and being a pioneer, you're preaching, you're witnessing all the time. There's a different resistance there that's different than it is here in Texas.
So when you enter that situation, people are not opening up to you. Does that do something to you as a person? Now, as a Christian, obviously, you're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to bring people Jesus, but does that do something inside of you as, like, let's say, the physical man or the flesh man?
Not really.
Does that eat away at you a little bit when someone doesn't receive you in that way?
Not so much, because you go into it with that mindset, what my deal is when you have people that are with you, and it's like, how do I say? When you have a good friend and you're no longer their friend, that's tough, but these people, I had no idea who they were. And most of them are still serving God in a church, one of our churches in California. So it was good, but it was rough, but you kind of already expect that, as that's what pioneering is. It's like, wagons and, rifles and cowboys and Indians. That's exactly what it is.
And I mean, by pioneering too, it's like you kind of start from scratch, right? Like there's nobody usually, because you're not sent out with a group of people, just your family, right? And other churches, they may send one person to another city and they give them like 15 people to go with them and they start another church. But the way that the door church does it is that the couple is sent out with their kids, if they have kids, and they basically start from scratch.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You're believing God. I had 2 girls when we went, and then I had my 3rd daughter in California, and there were some lonely times, moments there. There would be like sometimes there was a time where I lived out in the orchards, out in the country out there, and there would be someone calling me in the middle of the night, and would never say anything, just breathe, and just you could tell he was on the line, but did this for a while, and that kind of messed with your head a little bit, because when you're on Sunday morning, you're looking around the church, trying to wonder who's doing it, and it plays a number on you, but in most parts, you're there for one purpose: is see souls saved, love people, and keep your heart right.
So whenever you had those incidents, does it kind of bring you back to old days where, like, man, what's kind of looking over your shoulder type situations, or did it hinder your ability to do your job there? Is kind of what I'm asking.
No, it didn't. Because when I was out in the world, I knew that I was wrong, and I knew I had this was a little different, and I realized, you know what? I'm doing the right thing, so it's one of those, I knew I was in the will of God. And I think we were in California, and when we were coming back, people were losing their jobs. And my deal was, I had a wrong perspective of how pioneering went in the long run. And I remember coming back, because we just didn't have enough money. It was 2010, and it was people were losing jobs left and right. And so coming back to Austin, at that point, something really triggered in me. I guess it was more of the, I was more, how do I say, I'd become more bitter than I thought that I really was. California, and you're pioneering, you're moving, you're not really thinking so much of like what's going on supernaturally, like eternally, like in you or your family. And when we came back from California, I'd realized that there was, you come back for a reason, and they call it, what do they call it? Redirected. Yeah. And
real quick, before we get to that point in your life, and I do want to get to that point, what's one of the down points, and what's one of the victorious points being in California? So what's one of the most kind of like kind of moments, and the victory moment while you're in California?
One of the biggest thing is, because I told you, I'm really not so much a leader. I can get things moving and get people to do things and get people inspired. But with a long-term plan, I would start off by one of the down points is I did not create anything there new. I kept everyone in that church because a lot of people say this and I believe it. Whenever you take over a church, it's a lot harder to take over a church, especially for the first time if you've never done it before, than to start your own church, like, from scratch. And you're dealing with personalities. I kept a lot of people in that church. So, but I didn't have any, there was no new people. Like you bring someone to church and you can say, oh man, that's my disciple. All these people were pretty much like family. And it was like, I already knew them when I took over the church. So the down part was I didn't really feel fruitful, and I guess that's really your first time. I know maybe God's just trying to teach you something. And your first time, we did pretty good for our first time. The good point was because we were so into that church and we were so just knitted into like work, church, and just being able to just live for God and just believe God. God showed up a lot of times. My prayer life. I remember there were some times where there was no one in the church. So a lot of people don't go to church on Wednesdays in California. And so you just have church anyways. And I remember just my wife and kids were in the nursery. My kids were still young at the time. So there was no one in the church. And it was me and Greg Mitchell, the leader of the fellowship. We were doing song service together because we had an MP3 and it was his voice and this beat. And we just played music, and we do the worship and I remember one time it was a small green building, green carpet, green walls. It was the church we had was like, it was facing like, it was like in between, it was like a storefront building. And probably only fit maybe 40 people with chairs and all that. And I remember just being there one time and I'm doing the song service and I'm preaching. So I do the announcements, I'm talking to chairs. So if someone walks in, dude, I'm like, God, what are they going to think? Thinking I'm crazy, right? But you're doing it, right? Because that's what you're supposed to do. You grew up, that's, you just preach. And there are some times, PJ, man, where I just felt God show up there. And there was one service where there's a wall. I remember preaching the sermon And I'm like, I'm just giving it everything, you know? And there's no one there. My daughter peeks out from the back looking at me like I'm on crack or something, you know? Like, and I remember I felt God just standing there in the church, like kind of like with his hands crossed and just checking me out, like just watching me, you know? And I you know, there's some times where it's like God would show up and I just feel like, you know, I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know how to run a church, but I felt like God was involved in that, you know? And there were some times where looking back, I could say, you know what, God, you were involved, you know? Because a lot of times when I came back, I didn't feel like I felt like I wasted. It was a waste. You know, there were some times where I was wasting my life, you know, but those are times where I go back and think, no, God was there. You know, God met me in some storefront building in California, and it wasn't a waste, you know? So yeah.
Right. That's awesome, man. So when you come back to Austin, what's the reception like? Are there murmurings? Because people are people.
Yeah.
People are people, and regardless of what you've done for God, there's always going to be somebody that has an opinion. Were you met with open arms, or was there some resistance of you coming back? What was the atmosphere that brought some of that bitterness that you were talking about?
Well, this is the part of the interview that I am going to tiptoe around some facts just to protect the innocent, you know. But
Of course, but just give us as much as you'd like to divulge, because this is these are real things that happen, and these are real things that you can overcome because you're here. The only reason I'm interviewing you is obviously because you're still here. You're still doing what you know to do is right, and you're still living for God. And I want to show people even outside of the church, because there's times where I've seen it more often now than any other time in my Christianity, that people will leave churches due to they call church trauma. And that's basically somebody badmouthed them or disagreed with them and caused them to look at God in a certain way that they just can't serve him just because somebody did something, because sin in somebody's life affected them or while they were in the church still. We obviously know that perfect people aren't in the church. That's why they're there. That's why they're in church. Exactly. So because this happens, I think people get the wrong perspective of God. They say, well, how can God allow this? But they don't realize that God is working through each individual at their own certain time period. So what was it that happened to you that obviously you've gotten over it, but if you can just like you said, though, to protect the innocent, but kind of give us a little bit of a roadmap here.
Well, so really, when I went to go pioneer, I thought, like, man, we're gonna go do stuff and it's gonna be great. And I remember coming back because we didn't have any money. And it was pretty rough. There was some supernatural. Okay, I'll tell you, at the time, money was so bad. And I remember we were being in California. We had a fellowship, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning, coming back home, middle of the country. And we had bought our kids all the presents, right? And we're, just barely scraping by. And the devil played a lot on that, like, dude, you barely pay your bills, blah, blah, blah. And I remember my wife, my wife and I hadn't bought any of our stuff because we were just going to buy it after Christmas and just like, yeah, we'll just take care of that later. And my wife said this, we were driving home at 1 a.m, and she says, you know what? All I want for Christmas is my 2 front teeth. No, I'm joking. No, she goes, you know what? All I want for Christmas is a honey baked ham. No, a spiraled honey baked ham. Okay. We've never had that in the past. Never, never any of that. She's never eaten that. It's not conversations or nothing in our past. So I just thought it was weird. Well, okay, yeah. Well, I go to work the next day. The next day, a UPS truck drives down this dirt road, drops off a package, and you can guess it, it was a spiraled honey baked ham. And so one of the supernaturals of like how God was so involved in that time of our lives is it tripped me out because I realized that God, when my wife had spoke those words out of her mouth, that God already knew it, and he had that in some shipping warehouse ready to be delivered, and it was already on its way, and then I realized, man, you know what? God loves my wife enough that, you totally bless her. So that's kind of like a side note, it's supernatural, but financially, we were hurting really bad. And we came back to Texas, and we drove back. And I think at some point I realized, you know what? Coming back, a lot of people did not. We're still a new church, a young church, and sending someone out, people giving money to support. There's a lot of different thoughts, that kind of goes in how people's processing. But I'm thinking people didn't know how to process it. And it looked like it was like a moral failure, which it wasn't. It was not. But we felt like that's how we were received. And it was just some odd moments and some uncomfortable. The devil took a lot of those opportunities to exploit by like David and Saul, saying, well, this church is doing better than you did. There's, a lot of competition, and a lot of, in my head, it was like, I just felt like I was out of my league. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And a lot of those, I'd be honest with you, a lot of it just got to me where I was bitter. And I didn't realize the ramifications spiritually and to my family until after we came back and realized we had taken some heavy blows and we hadn't even known it. I would sleep at night and I'd wake up and my wife is crying in her sleep. We were just miserable, It was like, we just felt like we had failed. We felt like there, we had we were like, God, will you even? A lot of it was just a lot of unanswered questions. And so, unfortunately, this is where the part of the interview where it goes bad. I remember coming back to a place where I was like, I didn't process it well. I had some surgery done, and it's and with a lot of bitterness and a lot of resentment. I did not know how to process it other than to just operate. And I got addicted to pills. I got addicted to anything that would keep me from thinking about the present. And it was a very dark 10 years, But
so when you started going down that road, was there any thought of, hey, I'm starting to slip here, like, let me reach out to anybody? Or were you the type of person who's like, I'm going to handle this the way that I know how? And did you at least reach out to anybody? Was there anybody to reach out to?
I think I had slipped so far that not only was I doing drugs, but I was doing everything that I was doing before I got saved. It was like when you're talking about the demonic or supernatural, when someone slips back into sin, Bible says that it's the condition afterwards is worse than it was when you first got saved. And I was very my kids hated me. I lost my family for a year. We were separated. But yes, I my attitude was, I'm gonna do it by myself. I was so deep in that people around me did not know how to deal with a pastor that has slipped and done drugs, and even the things that I would expose to people was the tip of the iceberg. I could not, pride wise, I couldn't tell someone exactly where I was at, because it's just very awkward, and it just didn't happen.
So when you were in this state where you're doing drugs, you're doing all these different things, were you still attending church, or
Yeah.
were you just like, hey, I'm done totally?
Well, the deal is, yes, I was still attending church. I tried to get out of church. I wanted to get out of church, but I had woven my family in the church. I married in the church, and it was like I realized I could not. God would not allow me to slip back in the world, and I tried, but God would not let me. And I'm glad that God didn't let me. And I'm really blessed to marry the wife that I did, because she wouldn't let me. She fought for me, and I put her through so much junk. And it's one of the saving graces. I hated every minute of it. I remember coming off of pills, and I was doing so many things, but I just trying to come off and sober up without confessing was one of the worst things. I wasn't in ministry, but and people know, but people are people. They're not going to really confront you, And I had people at an arm's length where I didn't allow them to ask certain questions. And because I knew how to survive, I was very sarcastic and passive aggressive, and made people so stupid. And so I was very unapproachable.
You sound a lot like somebody else that I know.
Yeah.
You sound like me sometimes. I can be that way. It is pride that says, hey, I don't need your help.
Yeah.
I don't need you to help me solve my problem. I have control of this. So what was the wake up call? I guess you could say, you said you're doing a lot of different drugs.
Yeah.
Doing things to people, being ugly to people, which I can totally relate to because I've been there. And what was it that was like the final wake up call that said, hey, wake up, Steve, what are you doing?
Well,
and how did you come out of that hole that you were in? It seemed like you were in a lot of darkness.
I was very,
how did you come out of that dark place?
Well, there was 3 instances, and God started chiseling away just little by little. And I had gotten off a lot of the drugs, but I was still doing some like things called kratom, and that was just that was things just to like, it kind of weaned me off a lot. I was still in church. My wife and I separated for about a year, and I thought my marriage was done. I thought we were done. I was living with a friend, and at that point, and it's kind of a weird situation because I had lied so much, and I was putting on this fake facade of being someone that everyone knew that I really wasn't, but I was lying to myself. When I moved out, for the first time, I could look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what, this is who I am. And I came to a place where I had to look at myself first and say, you know what, I'm messed up, and this is what I've done. And it was a starting point. And as messed up as I had no idea I was going to get back with my family. No idea. I was only in love with myself. Didn't have another girl on the side or nothing. I was just so hooked up in my own pride, And I remember just starting at that point. And then that year, I remember going to church, and I would hate every minute of it because it was like I was wrestling with God for a year. Just the sermons, just someone didn't say something right. But little by little, I remember God one of the prayers that I was praying was like, God, you know what? I feel like I've wasted my life. You forgot about me. And I remember one night, I had a dream that I was dead. And I was laying on the ground, but I didn't feel anything because there was just so many drugs in my system. So I was just like very, whatever. And so I have 3 daughters. Well, in my dream, I had a dream that my youngest kicked me and pushed me in my own grave with her foot. And I fall into my grave, and I'm looking up. And then I'm looking at my other 2 daughters, and I'm talking to them. I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm saying something to them. And they can't hear me. And they're looking up at the sky, and they're angry. And so that was kind of like a wake-up call, because God was telling me, you know what, your kids are going to have to deal with the curses, And my youngest had to literally kick me in my grave. And I realized that my kids they're totally open. They're totally vulnerable. There's no covering. And I realized, so that was one. And then the other one was, I remember I picked him up one time, and I realized this was a huge one for me. I'm in the car with him, and my wife was with her friends. And so, she really wasn't hanging out with me, but I was with my kids. And I remember just driving, and we're listening to music like we normally do. And there's a song called Leon Bridges. The song is called Conversion. And the song is going, we're playing it, and we're having fun. And all of a sudden, at the end of the song, it stops and it goes into a hymnal. And the hymnal goes, and it was about at the cross where I first saw the light, laid the burdens of my heart, rolled away. And all of a sudden, God showed up in that car. I started to weep. I couldn't even stop. And I was just weeping, and my kids were in the car, and they were just quiet. And so for like 2 or 3 hours, couldn't stop. And I think about it like, why was that? Why did that happen? And then later on, it hit me that when I was a kid, because I'm adopted, my adopting parents at the church, I used to lead song service, and they sang, it was a Church of Christ, and we all sang hymnals, and we'd have the books, and I would lead song service. And when I would heard that, it was like God saying, you know what? It wasn't a waste, and God didn't forget about me. And it was like, there was hope. But at that point, I realized that I wanted to be right. I didn't want just my family or just to be in church, I wanted to be right with God, because I realized, because I am adopted, there was, when you're adopted, you're chosen, you're handpicked, and that's what God did. He separated me, and I realized it was like God giving me a new perspective of who I am, and so that was a huge, huge one. And the last one was, it didn't happen too long ago, but I remember at a men's discipleship, I remember sitting there listening to a sermon from Pastor Ruby, and he starts talking about headship and how, so he goes, I can't believe some of you guys still have a problem with headship. And I didn't think I had too much of a problem with headship anymore, until God reminded me that I needed to get right with my pastor. I remember talking to him the next morning, and I remember just talking to him. And I just said, you know what? Because my pastor at the time, when I was in California, he was also in California. And then he took over the church in Austin. And I realized when I was really just saying, I was really saying sorry, because I knew I was a very horrible person. God let me see myself as an individual in a church, how prideful and how hard to work with, and how much of a headache that I've been with people. And I just remember just talking to my pastor and saying, Pastor, I know I'm hard to work with. I'm sorry. And as I'm talking to him, I realize I'm repenting, And at that moment, it was a huge, the things that I struggled with, and the cravings and the burdens of the addictions, they really just went away, because the main root wasn't me doing drugs or doing all these. The root was I was bitter towards headship, and it went back to California, and I had no idea, but it was like God taking those roots, and they had woven themselves into every facet of my life that I was unable to really see clearly. And remember doing that. I remember just God, like sovereignty wise, just bringing back some new desires, bringing back, and me wanting to live for God, me wanting to be clean, wanting to think right, and I really felt like I just got saved all over again. And I think a Christian should come up to a place where they're reborn again, because we go through a whole bunch of junk. But those were really the main deals in my life that was, it really happened. In California, I remember just God's sovereignty of God, how much God knows more than we do, because he does. But when we know this, it's a whole nother level. My real parents met my mom one time, my real mom, and I was 21. But my real dad, I've never seen him, never met him, never talked to him. But I had some information one time, and when I was in California pioneering, I came across social security number, last name. Anyways, I looked him up. He passed away in 2005. So it was already 2009 at the time. So he'd been passed away for a while. But I realized that he was buried 30 minutes from where I was sitting in California. And he was buried in a veterans graveyard in Los Baños, California. And so that Memorial Day, I took my family, we went to the graveside and all that, and just thinking about God's sovereignty. My parents probably ran those streets back and forth, and how God sees like generations, and he's sovereign, he's omnipresent, he can be in more than one place. But how God put me in that neighborhood for a reason. And yet my family, my parents grew up in that area, and I just think that I thank God that he's got a heart for people, and he's willing to use people that have problems. And at the same time, he's willing to how do I say, to use people that have problems and to get them saved, so that he could use them in these areas where, I had no idea that my family ran those streets. But I think that I think it's just amazing that God would use my life like that, So
Yeah, it's awesome, man. It's like God had a plan. And we often, as people who try to speak to other people about the gospel, we always talk about God's plan and how God can orchestrate things. Your life story is God orchestrating you and putting you in areas so that you can be used, not only to be used for other people, but so that God can speak to you in your own life through these people who you may never see again, or you may have not seen, but God is using them even to touch your life beyond the regular scope of what you would normally what would normally happen if you weren't living for God. And man, this has been a wonderful interview. There's other stuff I want to get into. If you have time, maybe we can ask just a couple more questions.
Yeah.
So when you were, I want to just go back just a little bit. You said you were using kratom at the time, and I know that it's not illegal, but there is some kind of hesitation to
Right.
Some people have kind of that. They say it's a good thing. Some people say it's a bad thing. What was your experience on that substance?
Well, it is. If you like compare it to like, you compare it to like pot or coke, it's not as bad. You can function, you can work, you can talk, but like with any addict, you could abuse anything. And the problem was that my social environment did not support it because, I'm a Christian, and I had a hard time trying to move forward into what God had. And I remember God dealing with me. I went to Galveston, and I remember just God dealing with me. I remember we were just hanging out with my family, and God dealing with me, saying, saying like, now you come to a place, either you want this or you want that, and legally, it's, you're not going to go to jail for it, but anything that has your heart that much is an idol, and I really had to make a decision. I mean, with kratom, there is a withdrawal. You do withdraw from that. Some people say that you don't, but you do. And but it's not as bad as, as some other things. But I realized that I couldn't have my family doing kratom, and some people's lives, social lives that's okay with that, but spiritually, I couldn't go any further in Christ on kratom. And that's because it really is, it's a, there's, was it oxycodone and hydrocodone that they have a, what's the main deal? That thing. Can't think of the name, but it's the addicting part of it. There's, it messes with your endorphins and all that, but kratom is a little bit more socially worldwide. You could get it in the store, but I realized that I had to give it up, So
it was more a matter of God pinpointing something in your life that wouldn't, it's hindering you from going forward.
Yeah.
So here's, I think we're going to wrap it up with this, but it seems as if, to me anyway, that God gives you dreams and speaks to you by way of dreams. I know there's a lot of superstition about a lot of this, and even I have called you with dreams that I had, and you seem to have the ability to, I want to say interpret, or at least give some kind of a meaning to those dreams. Do you think that God speaks to you in that way, and how do you think that you have gotten that ability, if you feel like you've had that?
Well, I think in most cases, the only time that I was standing still is when I was sleeping. God trying to get a hold of me, either I wasn't all there or wasn't listening. But I do believe that dreams are huge. I remember one time I was in when I first got saved in 2000. I remember living in a house with a whole bunch of guys before I got married. And I remember there was a dream that I had. I'm not going to mention any names, but it was a dream where this guy that we were living with is he was like suspended up in the air, but he was bound, and he would look like he was just vulnerable. He was suspended, and he was just a tall guy, and it looked very spooky. But I remember yelling at this thing. I'm like, something had him, and I just said something stupid in my dream, like, "Stop! I'm gonna call the cops." Something really stupid. But I told my pastor, and I was probably maybe about a year saved. And I told my pastor, and he looked at me, and I thought he was going to laugh at me, but he just looked at me and he goes, "Okay, I'm glad you told me. Thank you." And it was something that like God was showing me something. And when I told the right person, my pastor was able to deal with it. And he dealt with whatever it was because I didn't get involved. But I just knew that, not every dream is a pizza dream. Sometimes God will, get a hold of you and put some and download some things inside you. But the idea is a lot of people live off dreams, and they're not really. There's a difference where people are very built on emotions and dreams, but the main deal is living for God, salvation, and faith. And a lot of people, they live their life off of omens and signs and superstition, and I try to stay away from that. But with dreams, I try to be sensitive to say, like the dream where my daughter had kicked me in my own grave. They say, and I don't know if it can be proven, that there's a myth. I don't know if it's true or not, but you can't die in your dream. But in that dream, I was already dead, and I didn't even know it, And so I do believe that dreams are a tool that God uses. And but yeah, so.
Would you say that that's a gifting that God has given you personally? I feel like whenever it comes to dreams, you need to be open. Obviously your mind needs to be open, your heart needs to be open. And then, like you said, God kind of places them. Do you feel that you made yourself open to that type of communication? Or is there something that you maybe can pinpoint that made you kind of more receptive to dreams?
Oh man, I don't know if there's anything I've done. I just know that when I stayed up late at night, there were nights where I wasn't even sleeping because I was afraid that I would die in my sleep, and I'd go to hell. And I think most of that was things that, because, how do I say, when I was not right with God, I was just afraid to die in my sin, And now I don't say that's a gift. I just know that God uses certain things to get people's attention. Like, why did he get a hold of, why did he use a burning bush to get a hold of Moses? There's sometimes things in our lives that God triggers that they're already there, I'll tell you this one thing. This has nothing to do with dreams, but it kind of explains why God does certain things, even when we have no idea. And he pulls on those things. I remember before I got sent out, I must have been saved probably about, maybe about 8 years. Anyways, I remember following up on this guy, and this guy, he wouldn't come into church for a while, and I was just kind of checking him out. So I went by the house that he was staying at, and it was one of his friend's house that was a really good guy. And he was like, "Yeah, he's not doing good," and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, he goes to the doctor all the time. And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, but he goes because he wants a prescription. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Never did drugs, and never did. I've never did at that point. Never was into that kind of stuff, right? And then he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I walked to that doctor's office, and I walked in the waiting room, and he was sitting there. And he goes, "Hey," he goes, "Dude, you don't need this." And when he tells me this, I just broke. Something in me was like, I just felt for this kid, but like in a way that I've never felt before. And, I wasn't like weeping, but I was trying not to cry because it was a weird thing, right? Well, when I was in my sin, addicted to drugs, pills, just doing things just to like function, because that's how I was just striving to function, And I remember like God, I remember just up all night. I'm like, God, I don't know how you can help me. I don't know if there's a way that, am I going to die like this, And I remember God bringing back that thought to my brain, taking me back to that time. And it was like God saying, you know what? I knew that was in you. I knew that you had an issue before you even did. And it was powerful because I realized that God knows what's in us, And so saying that, whenever dreams or whether it's how God speaks, God, if you have a relationship with God, God knows what's in you. And he knows that, I think he uses certain things to like get our attention, where we stop, and the Bible says that Moses, when he saw the burning bush, he said, you know what, hey, I'm going to stop and look. And God didn't talk to him until after he made that mental decision. And the burning bush was a way that God, it was like, you think about a fire, you never forget about a fire. And it was like, in my mind, it was like, why did God use that to get a hold of him? Is because it was a way of it was a way that God was saying, I have not forgotten about you, And I think that is probably one of the hugest things when you're fighting, just, you're trying to, you're struggling with your faith or struggling with the, God, did you forget about me? It's like, I think there's something in us that desires for God to speak, And then there was another time, remember at the altar, and we were just sitting at the altar, and I was still struggling with my deal, but I was still going to church. And it was 20 years of me being saved. And I remember sitting there at the stage. It was like my anniversary, right? And I just, it was horrible because I'm looking at, I'm thinking about like all the mess ups that I made. And I remember sitting at the altar and I hear a voice. I'm not even joking. It was so clear. And it was God's voice. And it was like a voice I've never heard before, but it was so clear. And the words were, I am so proud of you. And I didn't understand it. At first, I thought it was like God talking to someone else, and I just kind of like interrupted or just stepped in. But then I realized, no, God is talking to me. And it was like a voice. I can't even explain it. It was just so clear. And it was like dropped into my spirit. I remember just standing at the altar, struggling just to be in church. And I remember leaving. And I'm like, God, how could you say that 20 years of my salvation, that's a good, that I did a good job? Like I struggled. I was trying to like, how is this good? And then the more I thought about it is because I kept answering altar calls. Whenever there was like an altar, it was like, you know what, even though a man falls 7 times, a righteous man gets up, I probably butchered the scripture, but just saying,
Righteous man falls 7 times, but gets back up.
Yes. And so I'm thinking, I'm like, how is this good? But then I realized, you know what? It's not it's not the fact of what kind of job that you've done. It's the fact that you're still moving in that direction, and so I don't have all the answers. I just know that it's a miracle that I'm with my family. It's a miracle that my kids are saved. It's a miracle that I'm in my right mind and I'm off drugs. It's a miracle that we're having this conversation, but it's one of those, it's just one of the deals of God's sovereignty of just, if you allow God to like move and, and work in your life, God will show up, it's just little things, whether they're dreams or whether they're supernatural things, but it's a really, at the end of the day, it comes down to what we do with them. Are we going to live for God or not? And the last thing was the Bible. Jesus told Thomas in the Bible where he walks when he resurrects, and Thomas doesn't believe, and he walks up and he says, Thomas, here, feel my hands, feel my side. And then he goes, you know what? He goes, you believe because you felt my hands, you felt my side. He goes, but blessed are those who believe that had not seen me. And I think that really it boils down to just doing what we know is right, believing God, and getting, and if you're not right, getting right, because it's like you realize that without Christ, we're nothing, and I'm talking from just myself, my perspective. I just knew that without Christ, I was a wreck. I was a wreck, So anyhow, so that's pretty much it as a nutshell, So,
Yeah, I just want to say that's a great testimony, some stuff I never heard before. And talking to you, how can somebody not believe that God is real, especially the way that your steps have been directed? I want to thank you, man. I know this took a long time to do.
no, hey,
Through all the
hey,
little loops that we had to jump through, even today, because we tried for about an hour or so to get even on here. But I really do appreciate, man. I love the information you just gave to us. And one of the things I can say is that it all boils down to a relationship. People who want to be together, and that's basically what a relationship is. You wanting to be with God and God wanting to be with you, and meeting each other in the middle. And it seems like that's what it all boils down to, from when it comes from your perspective, my perspective. I know I've been through different things where it's like there's been times where like dips, but that's relationships. It's a matter of you reconciling and saying you're sorry and pushing toward a goal. And I believe that's what it all boils down to.
No, that's it, So I appreciate you having me, and praise God, man. You guys are good.
Yeah, man, that was a good one. I'm glad we waited all this time. We waited all this time. Yeah, man, I really do appreciate you setting out part of your day. And like I said, I know how long it took, even today with all the little glitches in the systems. But thank you very much, man.
God bless you. You have a good night.